Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Liz Garden. I am an elementary school principal in Mendon, Massachusetts. I am also a fellow with NASP for the Center for Innovative Leadership. I do a lot with NASP and also with the Association of Student Council, ASCA, which is part of NASP. And we are very excited during Student Leadership Week to host this webinar tonight. And we've titled it From Student Leaders to Students Who Lead, Reimagining Leadership in Elementary Schools. And I'm very excited to introduce James Lehman, who is the director of the Association of Washington Student Leaders. And that is part of the Association of Washington School Principals. And so, welcome, James. I'm going to tell you a little bit about who James is, and then I'm going to turn it over to him. We have a short amount of time tonight. And he's going to pack a lot in. So I'm super excited. But James joined the staff of the Association of Washington Student Leaders in 2017. As I said, he is currently the director there. Before he was in that role, very interesting that he taught band and marching band throughout Spokane. I am married to a musician, so definitely music is a big part of our life. So love that. He's been a keynote speaker, he's been a curriculum writer, an equity consultant, and a program facilitator. And tonight he is here to help us talk all things student leadership. So, and throughout this webinar, I'm going to be dropping a couple interactive questions in the chat. So feel free to respond there. If you have questions for James, jump in. And, if you want to just kind of set the stage for us, James, with what we're going to talk about tonight and learn from you.
Yeah, first off, my new good friend Liz, so amazing. Love this already. Yeah, no, this is just so exciting. Thinking about elementary schools and leadership, and so many times I think people omit elementaries just from the whole conversation of students as leaders, right? And I think that one of the big thing that I like to talk about a lot is that students are the power players in impacting culture and making power moves to just make certain things happen. And so we're going to just spend like the next 25-ish minutes diving into this whole beautiful world of how students can be change makers and impact players. What's our role as adults, and how can we reframe a few little things as it pertains to student leadership at the elementary level.
Awesome. And so, thank you. No worries about not having your camera on or off. It's okay. Like you can definitely interact through the chat. I just dropped a question in there to get people thinking what comes to mind when you hear student leadership in elementary schools. And I know that as I'm on the ASCA advisory board, and we talk about this a lot about, like what is student leadership? What does it look like? And especially in the younger grades. And so James is going to talk more with us tonight about that. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about kind of how you've seen student leadership change and evolve here.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll even take our own organization, for example. Like our mission statement used to be that we train and empower student leaders. And I think in many contexts, that's how we've all sort of encapsulated student leadership. Like we're going to find these kids, this group of kids, and just really hyper focus on them. But really, I feel like there's been a paradigm shift, not just with us, but sort of globally and nationally, really, of instead of training empowering student leaders, we're training empowering students to lead, right? And just this paradigm shift that all students can be leaders in whatever context they're in, right? Not every student is going to be student council president, right? But they can lead in their class, in the hallway, in the lunchroom. I also don't think we shine a big enough light on kids who are leaders at home and how we can talk about them as leaders. They're doing leadership moves. They're doing all the things that we would hope leaders do. But so often, if we only look at it from a historical context of we're going to get these few students who are just ripe for student leadership, and we only look at that select few, we're missing this golden opportunity to look at the power plays that all of our and power skills that all of our kids have. So and then it's really focusing on just leadership as a practice rather than position. And picking up garbage, that's a leadership move. Saying hi, being kind in the hallway, that's a leadership move. And I think the more that we can hyper focus our soundtrack for students around the moves that they are making, and we say that's something a leader does, and look at you doing that, right, that we can move beyond just the positionality of leadership, and we can really hyper focus on the practice of leadership and just doing the great things every single day. So I think that sort of brain shift is a big place of where people are in the world right now.
Yeah, I think it's like I see that just the like way we speak to students, calling them leaders, and like you
Yes.
said, not just because they're on student council or because they're, in a leadership typical role. There's a lot of power with that when you start to use that type of language and kids then like see themselves, they rise up to that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And also it's not just I sometimes there's a that whole great leadership video about the first follower. And I sometimes think that when we only look at kids who are just immediately the ones doing it, sometimes it's kids who are looking at behavior and looking at things that are positive and then doing that thing. That's leadership too, right? Of recognizing positive moves and then them incorporating that into their skill set. So I also love looking for those kids who are the first followers and are following positive trends and behaviors. Maybe they're not out front, but they're within the grouping doing those positive things. That's also leadership, right? And saying, look at you being a leader right now, um, and positively contributing to your school. So I love that.
Can you talk a little bit about I love uh when you've I happen to have an outline of James' talking points here, but one of the things that stuck out for me was that this idea of a strengths-based approach to leadership,
Yeah. Yeah.
because this is something that I know in our school, in our district, we've really tried to kind of approach talking about kids in general with a strengths-based approach. And unfortunately, I feel like in education, like we're really good at kind of finding the issues and trying to solve the problems, but we sort of overlook that there's kids that have all kinds of strengths. And that, so talk a little bit more about that idea of a strengths-based leadership approach to leadership.
Well, and I always think about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And I think like if we're not careful, we can look at Maslow from a deficit-based approach. Oh, they don't have this, so they can't have this, right? Instead of really looking at it of what they need right now, or flipping it, what is their super strength right now? And so I look at kids, some kids are going to be out front in and I'm using quotes, the traditional sense that we've seen leadership at our school, but it's like how I like to break down leader, leading, and leadership, right? And so often, if we only look at students from the leader lens, it sort of trains our brain to only look at the sort of the historical context of what leadership is. But when we look at students who are leading, right, and really that verb of it, we can start to see strength-based approaches in our kids. But it's also that mindset that all of our kids inherently have leadership skills, even the ones who are naughty and do things that are naughty. They have leadership skills, right? And I always like to talk about the crow's nest position of like, look at lunch and look who's leading conversations for different friend groups. Those students have influence within your school, and why not tap into them as a resource? But part of it is we need to move past some preconceived notions. That not every student already has these skills. They can always grow and be continue to be heightened. But I already know some kids are really good listeners. That's a leadership skill, right? And so I sometimes think about what are inherently great leadership skills that we look for, and then look for students who are exhibiting those things, right? Instead of the other way around of looking at the person first and saying, I hope they have these skills. I'm telling you, if you look at, I want to find students who are just have so much empathy. If that's your mindset, you will find students who have a lot of empathy. And so sometimes it's just flipping the way that we look at it, right? From the observational strength spotting and looking at, hey, this is what we're looking for. We're looking for more empathy. We're looking for more fairness. Those are all leadership skills, but often I sort of cringe when people call them soft skills. because they're more important than that. And so I think reframing that can be really beneficial. And using that to create student panels and interviews and reflections. I don't, I sometimes think people think that student panels are only for secondary students. No, they're not. Um, I did a student panel with first graders, second graders, and third graders about recess culture, about what's working with recess, what's not. And I called them my recess leadership group. So they immediately knew I'm looking at you as leaders in the school. You've been identified as people whose voice is really important, and you're going to help us figure out how to make your recess culture better. They can do it. There's a student in Washington State, third grader. The principal said, they asked every kid, they did empathy interviews. Who are the heroes and villains in your educational space right now? And a third grader who is a multi-language learner said, I don't like being pulled out from the rest of my class to learn my English skills. I feel othered. So they changed the entire school schedule based off of what one third grade girl said, right? That's leadership right there. And so I think often if we wait for them to mature in this notion they have to be a certain age in order to contribute, we're missing opportunities. And so strength-based approaches, knowing that, and I don't know if you've ever met second graders. I think second graders are some of the most opinionated human beings on the planet, right? And
I used to be a second grade teacher for many years. I love them.
yes, yes. And my nephew's in second grade right now, and the things that he is just so passionate about, and he'll tell you exactly what he wants and need, and it's like we can tap into that. And I always tell him when he's sharing things with me, I'm like, you're being a leader right now, right? And so I think it's just that reinforcement that what they're doing is leadership and awesome.
I love it. I am like so excited. I was like, oh, I want to figure out some panels at my school because
Yeah,
I think it would be awesome to put that together. And you're right. I don't know why I shouldn't be thinking like it has to be like that's high schoolers. No. I mean, I know that I know that I have a lot of strong opinions in my school and kids that aren't afraid to kind of they love to write me letters and propose new things at the school and that's a leadership skill, right? Like to be able to sometimes it's the quiet kid who maybe doesn't speak up in the group but they'll send me a letter and they'll say, I was noticing this at lunch, like can we talk about making a change, and that's a leadership skill, right? Like so I think that's awesome. And I'm also thinking about, I'm going back to your statement too about leaders at home because I think uh, for good or bad, I have often referred to my own daughter as having leadership skills because she is very, she kind of runs the show at home with
yeah,
around with us. And so those are skills that like, I'm proud of that she will hopefully channel in a positive way.
yeah, yeah.
So maybe you shared a few things, but maybe you can kind of tell us, some practical tips here for just some more. I mean, like the panels is one thing, but what are some other practical tips here for building this, I'm not going to say leaders, for creating leading opportunities.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think one of the things is I like to think I like to compare a lot of things to like Spotify, right? And like music and like what is your school's soundtrack when it comes to leadership, right? So I think one thing that we can do is just build leadership moments into daily routines. Hey, who has noticed somebody being a leader this week? Who's noticed somebody leading this week? Teaching kids to notice and call that out because they're going to call on their friends and people close to them. But I think the more that students can have a positive relationship with the word leading and leader, it's going to serve them better. So how can we build that into the day? Is it shout outs on morning announcements? Is it something on the reader board of here are students who were great leaders last week? And so many elementary schools, one of the things I love about elementary schools is you are so brilliant with like your school's like acronyms, like we're like but turning those not just into like practices, but turning that into leadership. What does leadership look like with those fun words that you all have that are just so woven into your school context? So I think turning that into and just turning those into daily leadership routines, um, but also celebrating like the non-traditional ways that we celebrate leadership. I sometimes think like, hey, who It's also fun when you can get families involved and have families send you an email, specifically of kids who are leading at home. Because then you can say, hey, because some kids won't get recognized in the traditional school context for whatever reason, but at home they're doing really great things. So having a family member, somebody they're close with, send an email that's like, hey, James has been awesome at just taking care of the family dog, right? And they're like, you know what? That's responsibility. That's a leadership thing. So I think the more that we can think outside the box and creative, and how can every student throughout the year get a moment to be recognized as a leader? Um, so it's not just for an exclusive group, but every kid gets touched with the leadership magic wand at some point during the year. Like that's where I think magic happens with kids. Um, and then your older students mentoring your younger students. That is leadership. When one of the things when I did that recess group, the second grader said, "We don't know how to play the games." So what did we do? We figured out fifth graders to go down and show them. Fifth graders getting a chance to be leaders within their own school, and some of them that's their younger sibling, that's their cousin, whatever. Like that's a huge move. So having students be a part of creating that culture and mentoring. So often we use the word mentoring, right, or near peer or the buddy system. We can also call it leadership. Right. And so sometimes I think we have to somehow rehabilitate the word leading and leadership with so kids know that it's accessible to them, right, and available to them. Um, kindness captains and playground buddies, like any place that it sounds like I'm quoting the Lion King with every place the light touches is your kingdom, but every place the light touches is a place to find students who can be leaders in that space. I work with a school right now who all their fifth graders have a leadership job. One of those jobs is there's a group who's in charge of the recess equipment, and they're the kids who love recess. And they are now so territorial and protective of the balls and all the equipment because they're responsible for making sure that it looks really good and everything gets returned back. That's leadership, right? So I think practical tips is what do we already have that exists? Because I know as principals and school leaders, the last thing you need is one more thing on your plate. So, what are systems that you already have where you can just sprinkle the leadership dust on it and start recognizing students as leaders? And then what about student-led safety videos? What about a video of your students giving a tour of the school? So when a new kid shows up at your school, yes, you could do the typical tour, but what if you also got to send them home with a video of students talking about the cool parts of the school? And I always say that every school has got like the best drinking fountain, right? Right. What's like, right? The students hype up on, right? So students giving a tour that families then also get connected. Your students can be a part of all of those things. What if students did that for open house? And it's not just the adults at the school, but it's students talking about the best parts of school. Um, and I don't know if you know this, but many of those kids are phenomenal when it comes to editing videos and doing all of that stuff. And they can do it faster than most of us can even Googling how to do it. And so I think that there are just ways that we can do things where students can take the lead and we get to celebrate and hype them up and be their cheerleaders as leaders all the time. And there's that whole quote, people support what they help create. And I think if students are a part of your culture and they see that we as adults recognize them as leaders, younger, it's going to be awesome. So I think those are just some small things some tips and tricks that we can add, but I'm all for all of those things.
Yeah, I love it. And like I'm gonna in a minute, I'm gonna see if hopefully maybe some people that are joining in can like drop in the chat some things that, either like something that you heard that you want to try out or something that you already are doing. I will share like when you were talking, I was like, oh yeah, like first of all, one of the things that I've found is you give a kid a badge like doesn't matter what it says, but like that is like that everybody covets the badge. And so like one of the things we did this year was my school goes up to fourth grade, so we made some badges and fourth graders became lunch leaders, and I it was the cutest darn thing. First couple of days of school helping the kindergartners who are like,
Yes.
they don't know where they're going, and the fourth graders, I had this one boy who like every kid he was like, do you want carrots? Do you want carrots? Do you want? I was like, you don't have to ask them all, but but no, he asked every single kid like, do you want carrots? But like they were so excited to have the badge and um, it just was like such an awesome thing to see something like that. I think about also, I was pretty proud of my students. Last year, we were kind of brainstorming ideas for Spirit Days, right? Like, and kind of have the typical Spirit Days. They wanted a dress as a favorite leader day. And so we talked about that, and they said, but the great thing was because we said, anytime we plan a Spirit Day, we need to be respectful because some people don't want to dress up for Spirit Days, or some people don't like it. And so they said, well, with this, you could not dress up because we're all leaders, Mrs. Garden. So like we can just dress as ourselves. And they advertised that as how they advertise it to the rest of the students. And I was like super proud of, I'm like, I could never have come up with that. And they did that on their own. And so then the kids on that day were like, oh, I dressed up as me as a leader, and it was like, great, okay.
Yes, yes. I
It's
love
awesome.
how awesome is and I love when students feel comfortable calling themselves a leader, right? And I
Hmm.
think so much of it goes to that soundtrack that's just embedded in the school community, right? And
Yeah.
um
And I mean, the thing
our
about
educators, teachers.
yeah, welcoming students and giving tours. I mean, I feel like what's so great is the kids will like what they pick out to say about what they're proud about their school. Um, I couldn't even like I couldn't come up with some of the things. I've been a witness to many of those tours in my school. And, like for one kid, it was like I didn't realize like we had a lobby bulletin board that we would change all the time. I didn't realize how much this kid like really loved that lobby bulletin board, right? And so that was what he was like made sure to show every new student like, oh, just so you know, like we change this all the time and this is what you're going to see on here, or like we do these portrait of a learner, competencies,
Mm,
but like we changed them into superpowers. And I had kids give a tour last summer and they said, oh, can we tell them about the superpowers here? And I was like, sure. And they said, when you come to this school, you get a superpower. So you might be a skillful collaborator or you might be a mindful learner. And, and they were like, they were really invested in it. And I didn't tell them to say that, but it was so awesome to see kids telling that to other kids. And so yeah, like anytime you can um, put them in, give them the chance to, show and demonstrate leadership, and then call it out so they see
yep,
that they are
yep.
they're being leaders is awesome. And I'm looking to see, I'm like, I know there's people on here, like they should definitely share some ideas with us in the chat. But maybe, I mean, we only have a few minutes left, so I don't know if you kind of want to, just sort of wrap things up for us, James, and then we'll see if anybody chimes in with
Yeah.
questions or things to share.
I mean, I think inherently people do a really good job. I think I always tell that people at the secondary level need to learn what people at the elementary school are doing because you all do such a great job of belonging and culture. And I think it's just how do we find spaces for students to be a part of it, and then once again calling it out. You're leading, right? And I always say that leadership should be accessible, available, and attainable. And as long as we are grounded in those things, that it's accessible, that any person could be recognized as a leader. I see somebody said student-led conferences in the chat. Yes, yes, yes. That it's available to all students, that even students who have gotten in trouble, that doesn't mean that they're not or cannot continue to grow their leadership skills. And then it just needs to be attainable, right? And so, um, all those things I think are just really important to think about. I always talk about myself that I was what I would like to call a People magazine kid in my school. I did everything. I was, I was just that kid, and I'm not knocking myself. I was a People magazine kid. My brother, National Enquirer. Like we are two different people. But he never got tapped with the leadership brush. Nobody ever went to him and said that he had leadership skills. And we talk about it all the time now as adults. I was always painted with that brush. He was never painted with that brush. So going beyond the kids and students that we traditionally see in these roles and finding those other students, what a great opportunity in elementary for them to know that they inherently have leadership skills. And so going beyond our People magazine kids, but
Yeah, totally agree. And like when you were talking about that, I thought of like two things. I had a student many years ago. you know, was I spent a lot of time with him, and it wasn't necessarily in the beginning because of leadership, but I was like, I gotta do something because this kid is sort of getting tagged as he's the one in trouble all the
Yeah.
time, and I sort of gave him this project. I was every time he got sent to the office, I was like, I need help painting this bookshelf, and like
Yes.
I don't think anybody can do this. And he's like, I can do that, and so then it became like he was coming to the office not because he was in trouble, because he was doing that task. And then like after several weeks, he completed the project, and I was like, if you want to sign your name on this, and this is going to go in the lobby, and he like it, you could physically see how that changed
Yeah.
him, because it was like, oh wait, I have a different title now than I was that kid, and now I've become a different kid and he was proud of what he had done, and other kids like saw that he had done that. So that's one thing I was thinking of. And the other piece was I thought about another idea at a different school a couple years ago. As principals, we have to plan professional development, right? And like that's I mean, I do love it, but sometimes it can be like, okay, what are we going to do now? And one year before the start of the school year in August, I just reached out to some random students and I was like, I need your help. Are you willing to come in a couple days before school starts? And so to the teachers, I said, I've, brought in some experts here to help us like kick off our school year. And I had them waiting outside, and then they came in and I was like, okay, each of you teachers are going to be in a team with these fifth graders, and you're going to work on some vision planning for the year, and they're going to guide you through it because they're the experts in our school. And the students were like, oh wow, okay. And the teachers loved it because like they got to start the every it's coming back to schools can be an exciting time, but like to like have students right away working with them, and then we kind of displayed sort of the work they did in the lobby. So that was just another thing I thought of like use students for professional development,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that's another great leadership opportunity for kids.
I
Oh
love
my
it.
goodness. Well, this has been like awesome. I mean, fast paced and but I hope that people that are joining in are like hearing the important message. I just really love that James started with about how, we kind of need to shift from thinking about creating leaders to really teaching about leading and like giving kids the opportunity to lead, and how that mindset shift can really make a big difference in your schools. So thank you so much, James. And oh yes, and thank you. And if you want to stay in touch and definitely connect with James, here is his contact information. Um, and um, and thank you all for joining us. I don't know. I'm like, nobody, it's pretty quiet in the chat, but I'm sure they were all soaking it in.
Totally.
So thank you so much, James, and thank you to those of you joining us tonight. And I can't wait to hear about all of the leadership opportunities that are going to happen in your schools.
Thank you, everyone.